Welcome to the Automation Unplugged podcast, the podcast for technology professionals, featuring leading industry personalities. I'm your host, Ron Callis.
Let's get started.
Hello there. Happy New Year, and welcome to another episode of Automation Unplugged. We are a couple of weeks into January 2026. I hope you all had an amazing holiday season, and you're all at this point back in gear, ready to be driving forward towards a successful and profitable and rewarding 2026. I know for some of you, you had a great year in 2025. Some of you, 2025 was a little bit harder than you wanted or expected. Maybe flat, as they say, flat is the new up. Maybe a flat year over year was your experience. Maybe you had a down year. Regardless, you're here with me now. You're going to tune in and listen to hopefully a fun interview where you're going to learn from some industry veterans. They've been there, done that, lived to tell about it. And I couldn't be more proud and honored to have returning guests, Pat and Phil from Pacific Audio and Communications out of Hawaii. These are long-standing clients of One Firefly, good friends in the industry, and just all around great guys, great operators, friends of anyone in the industry that's ever met them. They're always there to help and assist whenever possible, whenever, wherever. And let's go ahead and get it started because we actually have something to celebrate. They're known as PAC, P-A-C. Let's go ahead and bring in Pat and Phil, and let's celebrate this exciting news with them that you're going to learn about here in just a minute. Hello, gentlemen. How are you?
Aloha.
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 Aloha. Pat, what is the exciting news here in 2026?
We get to announce our 35th anniversary in business. Phil can go into the details of how it started because I wasn't part of that in 1991. So he can start that up and tail into it. But yeah, he can chime in on that 91 startup.
The 90. All right, we're going to get into that. Pat, where are you coming to us from today for the show?
I'm actually at my home office on Maui. So we're glad to be here and thank Ron and your team for making it happen.
Hey, our pleasure. Phil, where are you coming to us from?
My home in Wailea. Our main office originally started on Maui. So Pat and I are both located on Maui.
Both, and are your homes? Do you guys live near each other?
Yeah,
8 minutes away, maybe.
It's an island. You can't
minutes,
get so far away.
You can't go too far. Yeah.
Same general vicinity.
Same general. If you were to jump on a bicycle, how long would it take you to bicycle to Pat's house?
10 minutes, probably.
Okay, it's pretty close. It's pretty close.
Yeah. We're not, maybe, I don't know, a couple of miles.
So, Phil, it is possible there are people that are watching us right now on YouTube, or maybe they're listening to us on their drive to the job site, or maybe out on their morning walk or exercise. Give a high level explanation of PAC to the audience. What is the business? What type of projects do you guys do, and where do you do those projects?
It's one of those things that the projects have changed over the years, but the majority of our clients are West Coast tech business people, CEOs, those types of clientele. We have our occasional celebrity, clientele as well. We've had a billionaire client, or actually 2 billionaire clients. over the years. So it's a gambit of a lot of different clientele, and the change of moving to different islands brings a whole nother understanding of, different clientele. Oahu has a more local, there are Fortune 500 companies on Oahu, so they have a lot of high-end local people that live, there. Most of our other clientele that are on the outer islands are, temporary residences where they're here for, a couple of weeks, every, couple of months or so, or, more typically it's, Christmas, Thanksgiving kind of time frame.
And today, in 2026, when you look back, like say the last 12 months, 24 months, what percentage of your projects were resi versus commercial?
We've actually changed over the last probably 2 years, where we're probably now 50-50. We're doing a lot more commercial now, specifically because the office on Oahu and some of the mainland work that we're doing. We have, and the reason that we're doing mainland work is we have a contact that is an investment company that's based out of Oahu that go out and buy hotels, renovate them, and then sit on them for a couple of years and then sell them. And so that contact has brought in a ton of work for us in the hotels that they have purchased that they're remodeling.
Now, where I started, when I brought you guys in, I referenced your 35th anniversary, and then Pat quickly said, yeah, I wasn't here yet. My brother started that back in 91. What are maybe your most immediate reflections, just at a high level, knowing that you and your brother have been in business now for 35 years. I mean, there aren't many businesses in general that can say that. And there certainly aren't that many audio video or automation companies that can say that.
Honestly, I think clients, and picking the right clients, right? And there's a lot of luck. There's a lot of luck in it. I think that if you understand the need of the client and you pick the right clients, and I'm very specifically saying that, there's clients that we walked away from, large jobs that we walked away from just knowing that it was not going to work. And there's some of those jobs that you try to get and you're kind of upset you don't get, and this is where I think the luck comes in. Down the road you find out that, oh my gosh, it was such a nightmare project, and we just saved years of my life not having to deal with that project. So I think, yeah, you got to hustle, and do all of that. But if you can figure out how to pick and choose the right clients, that is the biggest, thing that I can try to give to other people is, and it takes a while to figure out. It takes a while to read and learn how to read clients. And
what are some of the clues? Like, give a scenario, because there's entrepreneurs that are younger in their journey, earlier in their journey, and they're leaning in right now, hearing you say that. What would be some of the examples or clues maybe that get your spidey senses tingling, that say you and Pat, you're like, man, we probably shouldn't work with this client?
I think it's everybody's kind of individual in that aspect. And I think we've been really, really lucky. We've had only 2 clients that we ever walked away from. And we've had a couple of clients that we did and were able to facilitate a meaningful breakup with. But the majority, and I got to knock on wood. I mean, how we've navigated this, it's hard to put into a perspective.
It's got to be more than luck, though. I do believe in luck.
It is. Yes, it is. And I think being real to the client, not, there's a constant need to sell, right? And that's not our MO. Our MO is to ask the client, what they would like their systems to do, and then allow us to, facilitate that for them.
And one of the things you do, Phil, that's good too, that you couldn't do back in the day is once we hear about a client or an architect or designer, or whatever it is, Phil's been good at it, and where he would actually go on LinkedIn and look this person, do some research on this person, since the internet's come available and you got LinkedIn and a lot of these things. So that's changed over the last, 10, 15 years. Prior to that, it was definitely different. But Phil's always been good on that, is researching the partners, be that the client and or the build team.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Pat, what jumps out to you as just at a super high level? I'm going to dig deeper, but before we go there, just at a high level, what do you think is necessary or maybe attributed to you guys being around for 35 years and being well respected and as relevant today as you ever have been?
Well, a lot of it's going to mimic what Phil said. The clients and that partnership is there, and understanding that, and like Phil said, being honest with the client. We're not salespeople. I'm a tech, and I'll tell somebody that straight up. I'm not a sales guy, but we're forced to do it because that's the business, right? We're in business of selling, servicing, and selling. But to me, the higher part of this is being honest. One of my mottos is know what you know, be good at what you know, but more importantly, be honest about what you don't know, right? Because when you start fibbing or lying or taking things in an area that you just don't know, now you're probably looking at problems, right? You're getting off that beaten path, and we've always stayed on the beaten path. When it goes off the beaten path, that's when those red flags pop up that Phil was talking about earlier, right? And we after 35 years, you learn some of those red flags real quick, and you don't want to repeat those again. So for us, it's being honest, not being that salesperson. And I got to bring it to the team. I mean, Phil, what are we at now? 32, 34? I just 20. Go ahead.
We're 27. We're
27.
27. Yeah.
27. I'm curious, Phil, today, current state, how do you structure the company? Is there a leadership team, or how do you think about organizational structure?
Right. And that's where I wanted to go, Ron, is and all that. We'll chime in on that, but that team is very important, especially opening up 4 offices. Plus you got satellite operations on the mainland. That's a logistical thing. Anyway, Phil can chime in.
It is. And it's really interesting you would think that, Hawaii is Hawaii and the islands that we have here are similar. It's not the case. They're so dissimilar. Not only the environments that you're in, Kauai being, one of the wettest places in the world, causes, other issues. Maui, with it being much drier than it has been, is causing issues. And so, and I guess, it may be similar to, other companies that have multiple locations in a state, say a large state, and you can't drive from one location to somewhere else, and you have multiple, offices. And so it's challenging that, we have to have, specific locations, but it's the people, we have GMs on each island. We have a COO that kind of manages all of the internal stuff that's going on. And then, the local crews that are doing all the work and those types of things that, so it's a larger, and this only has happened in the last, 5 years. We were Maui based and Kauai based for a long time, and opened up Big Island and Oahu 2019 and 2020, all right during COVID. And
what led to opening those islands up? Was it demand?
There's always
demand
been
or
demand.
opportunity?
More opportunity than demand. And I think another thing that you have to do is you have to take hold of opportunities that come your way. And there was an opportunity that came our way to basically start up on the Big Island with projects already, moving forward, with money ready to be, billed. And it was figuring out how do we take advantage of that opportunity. It was a contractor that was having a hard time. Monetarily, he was in bad shape. And so we came in and said, okay, we'll take over the projects. He had lost his license. He couldn't do the work. We'll take over the projects. We'll hire the crew. We'll structure it as we structure our other locations. And it worked out well. It took a little bit of time to understand that area. And, it's actually right now one of our biggest producers.
Wow.
Yeah.
You didn't see that in 19
we
19
knew,
or 20.
Yeah, we knew that there was a lot of work that was going on there, but it was like, okay, how do we facilitate not only, having the connections to the contractors and the builders, but then how do we start an office? How do we find the installers? How do we, all of this stuff that would have had to come with starting a brand new location. And I know that, a lot of the larger, Paragon and what's the other large
AHT.
AHT and those types of people, it's easier to say buy out an existing company, right, than to start new, right? Because there's infrastructure already there. You already have the people, all of that stuff. And so I could see now, that reasoning and what they were doing and why they were doing it.
That makes sense. I want to go back into the history of the company, particularly for this I'll call it this 35th anniversary celebration for you guys. But before I go there, I'd love to hear a reflection. Pat, I'll start with you. Just when you look back at 2025, how was the year? What was good? What was weird? What was bad? What are your thoughts about 2025? Just in your in the spectrum of all the years you guys have been at it.
Yeah, I mean, we're dealing with an election year, which causes issues regardless of the party and all that. And that always happens. I think it's like we're seeing, like everybody else, the bigger struggle right now is finding bodies. That would, if you were to ask me today, what's the single biggest hurdle right now is finding competent bodies. And Ron, you and I had talked about this at the ProSource event, because you're coming up with some ideas about working with colleges and stuff like that, which I think is a big need in our industry, because for every 5 tradespeople that are retiring or exiting, There's only 2 in the next generation that are coming up that are being prepared. And I'm not even talking about our industry. I'm just talking.
Oh, it's a global shortage on apprentice level, people that society needs: electricians, plumbers, low voltage contractors, roofers, builders, you name it.
Yeah.
Society has programmed the youth to think that the only ticket to success is a 4-year degree,
or a YouTuber, or something to that effect. Which again, that's not
it's not bad, but it's not accurate. What society actually needs. I mean, you can be a youth. I mean, you could be in your early 20s and practicing a trade and running circles around in terms of income what someone coming out of school with a 4-year degree. If it's, and I don't want to pick on liberal arts degrees, but if it's a certain degrees, you're going to make, you have a probability of doing well, but a lot of degrees, it's very uncertain. I'm right there with you. I totally agree.
Well, and I think that's part of the reason why you're doing what you're doing, so.
There's certainly a hiring shortage. Now, you in Hawaii, maybe just describe to those that are not from Hawaii or haven't visited there, what's the extra layer of friction you have in terms of trying to build your talent pool?
We're surrounded by water, so you ain't driving anywhere. So logistics here are a big deal. I mean, just not even talking about bodies, right? I mean, that's a whole separate entity in itself.
What if there are people listening, Pat, that want to be in Hawaii and this is their dream place to live? Would you field their inquiries?
Oh, we'll field the inquiries, but after 35 years, I can count on one hand how many, sadly, that have come from the mainland over.
And why does that not work? It has a name.
The rock fever. That's part of it. It's part of it. But medical is another one too, because if you've got any type of medical things, I'm not saying that the medical system here is like really bad, but again, we're logistics here are different. We're isolated. We're the most isolated but populated landmass in the world, right? And there's farther places, but there's not a lot of people on it. But so you got to think of those logistics. So getting bodies here, it's a different animal, and the culture here is different. And you can't just get in a car and drive, right? And a lot of people on the mainland are like,
you can drive, you just can't drive very far.
Right, exactly. So there's a big I don't know what the word is that I'm looking for, but there's a big caveat with when we hire from outside the state. Those concerns are, okay, are there medical issues? Are you somebody that is very outdoorsy, that wants to get in the water and get in the ocean and go hiking and do these types of things? Because we don't have, at least Maui, the outer islands don't have the bigger population like Oahu does, where they've got dance club and nightclubs and these type of things. Kauai, for one, they're shut down at like 6, 7 p.m. They really don't have a lot going on there. Maui is kind of that in between. So when we start hearing or hiring or getting inquiries like that, there's a couple of extra check marks we've got to check when we're talking to those type of people.
Phil, you look like you wanted to weigh in on this.
Cost of living, it's probably the highest cost of living in the States anywhere. I mean, I think the average single family home, if you were to try to purchase, $1.1 million, I think now. And I think condos are at 700,000, maybe something like that. Our gas is typically around $4 to $4.50 a gallon, depending on seasonal. Food and all of that stuff that has to be shipped in is expensive. And you'd ask, regarding, how 2025 was, and I'm sure, number one on everybody's list was tariffs.
Yeah.
And we're still trying to figure that out. We're not out of the woods yet. And, it's very, very difficult to have a small business where you cannot understand, what your costs are going to be and try to present those costs to somebody to say, this is what it's going to cost. I mean, we've had to almost go back to COVID type of contracts where it says, we don't know what the cost is. We can tell you now what it is, but say, we're, usually our large projects, are in construction for 2 years. So we're pricing something out, a year before we have to buy it, TVs or whatever, right? And on our contracts now this is the number what it is now. I can't tell you what it's going to be when we go to order it. And unfortunately, that number is going to be done as a change order to the contract. And it is, some of the manufacturers have put line item tariffs, and what the costs are and showing that. Some of them incorporated it into, their pricing. So again, very difficult to figure out, how things are going to get priced out. It was a 2025 issue, which, is still ongoing.
Yeah, and Rob, we're still reeling from 2023 too with the fires, right? I mean, again, Maui within itself.
Well, we have that. Fill us in. Everyone listening, I'm sure, is not remotely as close to it as you are physically and your involvement. What is the state of the fire cleanup? How is Maui recovering? I mean, it was clearly devastating. Maybe even just state for folks that aren't fully tuned into what happened, and then what's the current state of things.
Sure. So I'll step back a little bit just to give people that are listening or watching kind of an update on where I'm at. Before I joined Phil in 94, 95, I was in the military and still am to a certain extent right now. I was with the Army, I was with the 82nd Airborne, and I got attached to the Special Forces 3rd Group out of Fort Bragg. So traveled the world, did all the things. Fast forward a little bit more, up to 2023, I'm involved with the Civil Air Patrol, which is the U.S. Air Force Auxiliary. So we're an auxiliary of the Air Force. We wear their uniform and all those things. I'm actually the Chief of Staff for the Hawaii Wing. So we oversee all the other squadrons within the islands. But I'm also the ground teams commander for the state as well. There's 3 or 4 of us in the state that hold that category. So we prepare for these natural disasters. And sadly, one of them was the wildfires, both in Lahaina and Kula in 2023. For those that had not heard or was living under a rock, that was kind of the big thing in 2023. We lost close to 2,500 structures, both residential and commercial, in Lahaina. And then I think we lost about 40 or so up country in Kula. And it was devastating. The fires basically, to me, when I saw the initial images, looked like somebody had dropped a bomb in the middle of Lahaina and basically obliterated 10 square miles of that old historic town. Lahaina used to be the capital of Hawaii, of the state. So that brought a whole nother set of dynamics into this. Not so much that our clients are those that lost homes, unlike the Palisades and stuff like that in Malibu. A lot of those were higher end clients. The homes themselves weren't really our clientele, but the commercial side of that, with all the restaurants, Fleetwood's was in town, and hamburger joints, all the local places, all the local fish, they're gone, completely gone. So the state as it is right now, I think they've got about, they've got the lands cleared, right? They've cleared the land of debris and all the supposed toxins and whatnot from the fires. So they're in rebuild mode, at least for the homes right now, which is great. But the problem we have is, again, we're back to, we don't have enough general contractors. We don't have enough electricians. We don't have enough of that supply chain to ramp these up quicker. Now, people are like, well, bring them in from Oahu, bring them in from the mainland. Okay, well, the problem is, where do we put them? We're already in a
where do they sleep and live while they're doing the building?
Yeah. So That's exasperated across the board. There's still some animosity, especially in Lahaina. They still concerned about the federal government coming in and take over and these kind of things. Because I was heavily involved on day one, really, after the fires. When the winds died down, our planes were able to get up and see this view. And then we sent our ground teams out that Friday to work with FEMA and all these other things. So I saw it firsthand. I saw a lot of what was happening. And I mean, I got to give credit to the local communities that really stepped up, and the encampments that they created were impressive, to the point where I told those guys they could probably train FEMA on how to do this, because they had everything they needed. I mean, of course, there's behind the scenes drama and this, that, and the other thing, but if you looked at it from the forefront, the community really came together. And I think it was a learning thing for all of us. We kind of knew that the federal government would take some time to get ramped up. Well, now we know it, right? It took a week, 4 to 5 days for things to really get into play. Up until that point, it was the community that really, took this thing over. So we're dealing with that dynamic as well.
What's happened to the local population? You said they were, did I hear you, 2,500?
Yeah, a lot of them have moved. A lot of them, as I mentioned earlier, are hesitant on the federal government. So much so that when we showed up that Friday, because the fires happened on Tuesday, Wednesday was the first time we could really get anybody in the air because the winds were just crazy. So our pilots were like, we can't get up. So a lot of the local people were concerned that the federal government, state, county would take this thing over, right? Oh, you guys got to do this, or you got to sell the land. You got to, no, none of that stuff happened that I know. But a lot of people have moved. A lot of people are still on the beach, or they're just camping because they don't want to come to this side, right? It's about a 45-minute to an hour drive. And for most people, that's not a lot. But when you were born and raised, say, out in that area, you don't want to leave your community, even if you don't live in a house. You're going to kind of stay there and help the community. So it's quite interesting. But there's still a lot of houseless that we're dealing with now. Some of the tiny homes that were brought in, I think only about half of them are being used because they're all on this side, right? Now, they have put together some really good properties. And some of the tiny homes, and Phil brought it up the other day, they actually look pretty cool. They're very streamlined. They're nice looking. They're not big, of course, but it's temporary. But for some reason, only about half of them are taken up at this point. So it's a very interesting dynamic.
And is that a cultural detail? It's just the people from that area don't want to come to your area and live in the tiny house?
Yeah.
And there's no place to put the tiny house over in their area?
Well, there is, and that's what they started doing, is they've cleared, like Maui Land and Pine is cleared out, and they're helping. A lot of these landowners have come forward and helped. And they're giving land to that. So the stuff that's happening in Lahaina now, that the land has been cleared and they can do these things, people are starting to move into those. But that was, again, 2023. So they've had 2+ years without anything. A lot of them were staying in hotels, and FEMA was paying these crazy prices for these hotels, right? And it's going to be a long draw. It's going to be a 10-year gig. Now, the semi-positive to this, other than some of the residential homes are getting built as we speak, I think a few have actually moved in. They have actually have a moratorium now that they're going to allow some of the front street, which was basically where the main strip was with all the commercial projects, the restaurants and all those kind of things. They're allowing them to move forward with some grandfathered in type statements, because some of those buildings were 100 years old, right? And they were just band-aided and band-aided and band-aided. So the concern was, okay, how much of the SMA and the permitting process are going to be affected by this? Because the seawall now, we've had issues with seawall or sea rise for a couple of years now. So they're like, okay, can we rebuild on Front Street? Well, they're pulling back a little bit. So the stuff that we saw directly on the shoreline that's not going to happen. But a lot of the buildings across the street that were not affected by the shoreline are now starting to work. As a matter of fact, I had a meeting with an architect last week, touring them through a couple of different facilities. Ryan, he both has an office in by Palisades in Malibu, and he's got an office here. Talking to him, he's already starting design work for some of the Palisades, Malibu stuff, and he's gotten calls for restaurants here on Maui. So there's some light at the end of the tunnel, but it's not going to be anytime soon. I mean, it's going to be a 10-year game for sure.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that overview. And I know when you're close to it and you're involved in it, both personally and professionally, it's been a pretty big part of life there in Maui. And it's going to be a part of life for, sounds like, decades to come.
And
sure.
one of our guys actually lost his house, was in one of the areas that was the last hit by the fire. And so they got out, sooner, but, it was so chaotic. He had just gotten back actually from his honeymoon, and I called him that morning and said, hey, you probably need a couple of days off or whatever. You're just getting back. And then that happened that evening, and we couldn't get a hold of him for a week. All the cell towers were down, so we had no idea what state he was in, what if he got out, if he didn't, and that was the most difficult thing is, nobody had contact with anybody out there, and it was just so chaotic.
Well, I'm going to ask you, Pat, just from the military background here. This was horrible. And it only affected under 3,000 homes.
Yeah.
And yet society breaks down a little bit when something like that happens.
Oh, yeah.
I've experienced my own version here in Florida back in, I want to get it right, maybe around 2005. It was a string of hurricanes that hit South Florida. And one of those hurricanes took out power, and we were without power for 2 weeks. And we were right on the verge of society breaking down. Gas stations were running out of gas. There was no food. There was no grocery stores. Armed groups were starting to visit neighborhoods. It was actually in that time period that I bought my first gun. After I watched that, I was like, holy shit, people are crazy. And so what is I'm just curious, you don't even have to have the answer, but it's where my brain goes, is Hawaii is a state. It's a modern place, beautiful hotels and beautiful people and beautiful, it's just society is well advanced. And yet a fire happens. I know it was horrible. I know it was terrible. And all these things break down. Is there lessons on how to change the power grid or change the cell phone systems or change some things so that next time something bad happens, we're not able to, or we are able to stay in touch with people and at least manage it better?
Yeah. And again, I'm just talking about because of the inside, circle that I have with the emergency operations centers and the joint operations centers, Maui operations, all those things, because I'm tied to them through Civil Air Patrol and working with them. Yeah. There's been a huge uptick in not only technology to start looking at different elements of weather, fire, all those things, or hurricanes, tsunamis. But more importantly, the EOCs, or the emergency operations centers, has opened up their training to everybody. It doesn't matter if you have specialized skills in search and rescue or any of that stuff. The more the community understands an emergency situation, the better the outcome will be. So they're doing training. FEMA, has their structured training for incident command stuff, and they're opening that up for everybody. I know MEMA, the Maui Emergency Management, has done a huge hiring protocol. Again, they're looking at that level. They're looking for people with experience, stuff like that. But smaller groups, they're allowing to come in and get some basic training. Like for example, everybody should have a 24-hour pack, what we call a go bag, right? I have one at the front door. This way, it's got everything, all the basic necessities I need. Your medication, 24 hours worth of food, clothing, just basic stuff. It doesn't have my cell phone in it, none of that, just basic survival instance. And that should be for everybody, in Florida even, because you guys deal with these hurricanes all the time. So the community is being taught what these go bags are. The county is coming forward and actually handing out certain smaller bags that have go bag and then people just need to add in what they need. So that would be one thing that I've seen advertised, whatever you want to call it, is the community training, and then what needs to happen if something happens.
Yeah, that makes sense. All right, I'm mindful of time, and I want Phil, I'd love to start with you. Tell us your version of the history of the company, and
So
where'd you start?
Well, it goes back a little bit even further than that. So, my dad, I was born in New Jersey. Pat was actually born in New Jersey too, and I have a sister that's a year older. She was born in New Jersey, and so my dad had an electrical contracting company and had a restaurant in New Jersey, and we used to spend a bunch of time. We would vacation down in the Caribbean. We would go down to St. Thomas and stuff like that. And he was offered a job to develop a piece of property in St. Thomas. And so he sold the electrical contracting company, sold the restaurant, sold the house, and we were supposed to move to St. Thomas. And Pat was born in the summer of 1970. We were supposed to move prior to him being born, and right before we were supposed to move, the people with the money that were backing the project pulled out, and so he had no job, none of this stuff, right? So then him and an uncle of mine said, "Hey, let's go check Hawaii out." They fly out to Hawaii in it's probably May of 1970. Spent a week out here, came back, and said, "Okay, that's where we're going."
That's paradise. Let's go.
Yeah, he didn't know anybody. Found some guy that he rented a house from, right? And took all the boxes that we had packed up that were supposed to go to St. Thomas, put labels on them to Hawaii, and we ended up out here in August of 1970. And
I was 6 weeks old.
I was gonna say, so for you, Pat, it's all you've known is Hawaii.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's just easier to stay born and raised here because I don't know nothing about New Jersey. I don't.
Right.
Yeah.
We have a ton of family still there, but I don't know squat.
Right.
So, background is, my dad was an electrician, and so he started electrical company here, started a development company here, did a bunch of other things here on Maui. Mauka Electric was the electrical company. Mauka means mountain. So it was, he was based up country. And he started that in 72, I think it was, 72, 73. I took it over. I worked it, as a 10-year-old, I would go to job sites with him and do all of that. I was the smallest guy, so I was under the houses all the time or up in the attic, all the time doing work. And so I took over Mauka Electric in 1986. He semi-retired, was doing other stuff. I ran a crew of anywhere between 6 guys, and I think we got it up to, we probably had 12 guys at one point. We're at one point the largest non-union electrical contracting company on the island. And ran that until about 2000, 2001, along with Pacific Audio. We were doing a lot of high-end residential at the time and noticed a need, for low voltage, specifically, alarms, and, distributed audio was kind of becoming a thing. You had Sonance doing speakers and ceiling speakers and stuff like that. And we used to do central vac was another thing that was kind of a hot button, or intercoms, the old Newtone
Yep.
Newtone intercoms, right? And so we started looking at that and going, I think there's something here. We had, my original partner was a general contractor, did high-end residential work. And so he and I got together and goes, we should do this, and he and I would do it, on the weekends when we started. And we actually started in 1990 that way. Wasn't really an official business at the time, until 91, when we said, hey, we got to make this official, and we started as an LLC, Pacific Audio Communication. And, we were doing phone systems. So that's kind of where the communication came in. And, we were doing audio and other stuff. So it's kind of how the name came out. And again, we were doing, stuff on the side on the weekends, doing jobs. We were doing his jobs, specifically as well. And that's kind of where we started. It was he and I, just doing stuff on the side or on the weekends. And
you say he and I, the general contractor, or who is the
yes.
he?
Okay. Yes, my original partner, Steve.
Steve. Okay.
And so
when did you bring Pat in?
So Pat had graduated from DeVry. He was living in Arizona, I think, right, Pat?
Yeah.
And we were like,
Liz were going on a trip.
Yeah, Liz and I, my wife, were we married at the time? I don't think so. I think it was my girlfriend at the time. We're going on a trip and stopped in Arizona to see Pat and see how he was doing, what's going on, and offered him, hey, if you want to come back home, we got this thing going on. And he was doing high-end 2-channel audio stuff at the time. Actually building his own speakers and crossovers and doing all of that kind of stuff. And we're like, hey, why don't you come back? And we convinced him to come back, and he moved back in 94.
Wow. And I'm assuming Pat in the beginning was an employee of the business, and somewhere along the line became your partner.
Yeah. So, and that, that went through, I think we were still working out of, we had a small space that we rented. We had become the only Sony non-retail sales business. It was the first time Sony had ever opened a non-retail company to sell TVs.
Wow.
It took us almost a year talking with Sony to get them to understand what we were trying to do. And they said, okay, we'll give it to you. At the time, the only place you could go was, Sears, or there was another place called Cherokee over here that was a Sony dealer. So retail store, basically. That was the only place you could get TVs. Costco wasn't a thing at that time yet. And so we started that. We had a little showroom that had some Sony stuff in it, and would bring clients in and show them what we would do. But it was really word of mouth that, we were doing jobs that Steve was doing, and other contractors saw what we were doing and said, hey, I need that for my house. I need that for my client. And that's really, how we started. Pat came in 94, and he and I were out, doing the jobs. Steve got really, really busy at the time, so he wasn't as involved anymore. We opened a larger showroom in, I think it was 98. Had a full dedicated theater with a Runco CRT projector in it. Mm-hmm. We had a Sony rear project. We had a living room kind of an area that had a Sony rear projection, maybe 55-inch TV. and then we had a drop down screen with I don't remember what the projector was. Maybe it was a Runco non-CRT projector on it or something. And I think at that time we weren't Crestron dealers yet, or maybe we were. We might have been Crestron dealers, and were able to have touch panels to run systems and things like that. So we created a showroom that had a living room in it, had a kitchen in it, and had the dedicated theater in it, so people could understand, how all this stuff would interact together. We had access control. We had an automatic door that would allow.
What was your
in.
peer group like at that point? I mean, if you were doing that in the late 90s, simulated home environment with integrated technology, that was relatively early. I mean, I want to say CEDIA was founded in the early 90s. That's when
they went. Phil and Steve
we were actually, we went to the first CEDIA and
is that in
signed
Amelia
up.
Island?
No, it was in San Fran.
San
if I
Fran.
remember correctly.
Okay.
Yeah, somewhere in San Fran area. Steve and I went to the first CEDIA show. It must have been 91.
Yeah.
Or might have been 91 or 92, somewhere in that area.
What was that like? All right, you got to tell that. So what do you recall? What do you remember from being in that
I don't
room?
remember a lot of it. There weren't a lot of vendors there that I can remember. It was a fairly small.
I've seen pictures. It was like a tabletop type show.
Yes. Yeah. And Sonance was there. We at the time were Sonance dealers. And I do remember there was a company called Butler in a Box.
Mm.
And it was the first aspects of integration. It was voice activated. You could say, hey, Butler, turn on some lights. Or, I don't think they lasted very long, but it was kind of a preview of what, the ability of this stuff. This is pre-internet. This is, all of that stuff, right?
That's
And
very, very early.
Yes.
I mean,
I was like,
early
wow,
90s.
this is, where this stuff could go, and at that time it was all independent. Your audio was independent. You had, did you have CD players at that time? Maybe it was just cassettes, and so no, CDs were out.
There were CDs. Yeah.
CDs were out. So it was a really interesting avenue to see. But I mean, the progression, of where we went from there to late 90s was pretty astronomical. I mean, the video progression of, going from, a VHS tape, to a laser disc, to a DVD, and then going to rental stores to rent DVDs, and then, Netflix, they mail you the DVD, it's just amazing the amount of stuff that we've seen, that people just go, huh, what you did? You had to do.
It's always been this way, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's just, technology is just an amazing, and we saw, doing electrical work, right, had been the same and still pretty much is the same that I did 35 years ago. The way you wired a house, the way you wire it now, still very much the same. Other than code changes, you wire the same way, right? And what excited me about this industry was it changed all the time.
Yeah.
Every
it's
6 months.
Also what drives you crazy, right?
It's
it drives you crazy. Yes. Yeah. It's a double-edged sword, but, every 6 months there's something new, and the, advent of the iPod. Oh my gosh, the change that brought, but you look at it now going, that's like archaic,
Yeah.
and going back, we've done, I don't know how many thousands of residential systems, right, over the years. But we still go back to some projects that have a VCR that
Wow.
still works, you know. I mean, I still have VHS tapes, custom, videotapes that I have that, we need to convert over. But,
I've got a box of them in my closet over here. I haven't, I even bought the converter so that I could convert them myself. I just haven't gotten to the project.
There's companies that you can send all that stuff to and they'll convert it for you.
I know. That's the way to do it. That's the way to do
But
it. Pat,
it's just crazy, the amount of technology and the change that happened, even in a short period of time. I mean, that short period of time that went from iPod, to iPhone to streaming, that's a short period of time in the gambit of life, amazing amount of technology change.
and now we have AI. What's your take on AI, Phil?
It's scary. It's, I mean, it again, double-edged sword. I mean, it's so good sometimes you don't know that is it factual or not, and I think, there's got to be some type of legislation that, puts some kind of a marker on it, that says, hey, this is not fact. This is AI. This is produced. This is not real, and I, in a entertainment concept, it's fine, but when you get into, things that are being presented online that are politically, motivated.
Well, it's a slippery slope when you look at the
It's
avatar.
a very, very slippery slope.
The ability to edit imagery and video, and you can't tell the difference. I agree. It's a strange new world.
It is.
I want to pivot real quick. Pat, what's it like been working with your brother all these years?
Some people at the Pro Source event asked that. It was like, you guys are going 30, you guys get along? I'm like, yeah, we do, because there's a mutual respect. I know what he brings to the table. He knows what I bring to the table, and we respect it. We understand it. So it's not, I'm not going to say it was easy by any means, but it's not what most people ask me. Is like, do you guys even get along anymore? I'm like, I don't think we really had any type of arguments, because, I know what he's good at and what he's, the processes and procedures, and I'm the tech guy, and, so it just, for us, it worked, so I can't really answer, somebody saying, well, how'd you make it work? We just did, now, granted, he's 8 years older than I am. So there's that, when we were younger, that was, lack of a better term, there was that disconnect. Because he was, when he was in high school, I was still in grade school. When he was out of high school, I was just getting in. So we didn't have that kind of growth together. But, and Phil can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we've gotten closer over the years just because of that respect.
Yeah, I Pat brings, a lot of stuff that I don't have the ability to, work on or work with. And I think that was the original reason that, we initially approached him and said, look, you have a skill set, that we need, that is going to be helpful to us. And, at one point, Steve, the original partner, had gotten so busy, doing his own stuff. Basically, I told Pat, look, we'll buy him out, and you become that partner. And, since then, it's just been, everybody's had their ups and downs. I mean, we all had 2008, that was just like, I mean, we went from, I think in 2007, sales on Maui, we were around 2 million, which was our best year ever. By 2010, we were at 450,000 in sales. It was just, we had to let everybody go. just Pat and I, and we actually went back to doing electrical work.
Wow.
And it's one of those things that, it usually takes a little bit more time for us to see it out here. And you wouldn't think it would, but it's a 6 month or 8 month lag. But because of what happened in 2008, right, everything stopped, right? The architects stopped designing, all of that stuff stopped, right? So in order for that to come back, it's a 2-year wait, because the people have to buy a piece of property. Then those people have to go to the architect and get it designed. And then they have to go to the county and get a permit and all of that stuff. So none of that stuff starts. And then, we don't get into it until, maybe 8, 10, 12 months before we get into rough-in, right? So it's a 2 or 3 year lag, right? From start to us actually being on a job. And so we had to figure out what else we were going to do in that time period.
That's one keys. I think one of the keys to success, right, is just being resourceful and resilient, finding a way.
Yeah.
You fall down. It's not whether you fall down. We all fall down. It's whether you pick yourself up. And you've been at it 35 years. You guys have picked yourself up a lot. I want to close on the topic, the idea. Is Pat going to be around for another 35 years? And if so, how are you going to do that? What's the game plan, Phil?
That is the game plan. I mean, we have a really, really good staff, and we feel that, we would like to facilitate them to have a lifestyle that both Pat and I have had. And if you do it correctly, and you're honest with your clients, and you're compassionate to your employees, that there's a really good living to be made. And so we feel that it is our responsibility to allow them to have this and be able to do this. And we have several of our key employees that have accepted that responsibility.
That's great. So you're looking at a plan to transition ownership of the company over some period of time to some key stakeholders in the business.
Yes. And, it gives them skin in the game, right? And it gives them, a reason to want to stay. And it's interesting. And looking back, when this whole 35-year anniversary idea came up, and I just happened to be looking at in QuickBooks in our employee list of people that have, been employed with us, and I started counting, and I figured, can't be that many. We ended up, I think, around 95 people have been employed at Pacific Audio at one time or another. And we have some that have left and come back. And so we consider them our SNL 2-timer club or 3-timer club or 4-timer club, and we have a few of them that are, I think, at least in the 3-timer club or in the 4-timer club. So I think, looking back at that, we must have done something right? That, they want to come back. There's some employees that I'm sure want to come back, and we don't want them back.
They're not welcome.
They're not welcome. But, and some of the people that we are going to transition this to are those 3- and 4-timer clubs employees.
That's interesting. Pat, when you think about the business lasting, thriving into the future, what do you think will need to be true? Like, i.e., what lessons from the way you and your brother have run the business need to be true, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 30 years from
Yeah.
now?
Yeah. And it comes down to the team being transparent. Phil and I are pretty open with our teams. And they feel that. I mean, that speaks to what Phil was talking about. You've got 3 and 4 year or 3 and 4 times that somebody's left and come back for whatever reason. There was a couple of them that left during 08 and 09 because of what happened, right? Makes sense. And then they came back.
Yeah.
So it's just being open, being transparent with the company. To a certain extent, you don't want to give them all the information, but we share numbers with our teams every Friday, right? Our executive teams. Hey guys, we're low here, we're high here. Or, we let our COO Pono kick in. He's doing a great job with it, and he's one of those guys that gets it. And I think, Ron, you and I might have talked a little bit about this, and this is kind of interesting, right? If you think about it, Phil and I have done this. I mean, Steve too, figured this out on our own, right? We don't have a college here. We don't have, Best Buys. We don't have those things here. So it was a matter of us figuring out Maui at first and how this technology thing worked, going to CEDIA, going to trade shows. There's really nobody else here to mimic. Lance from Design Systems was on Oahu. He's kind of the godfather. We're right behind him, right? But we're still here. Sadly, Lance has had to close down and all that. So we're right behind him. But it's interesting to see the dynamic of how the mainland integrators have worked, because some of them went and worked for other places. We didn't have that availability, but some of our team has. They've left, they've grown, they've learned possibly things that we may not have learned because they had the better exposure on the mainland than we had here. Again, if that's good or bad or in between, I don't know. But their experiences that they could bring back to us, and which they are now, is worth its weight in gold.
I'm going to close out here. Speaking of just pass it forward, or the idea of carrying knowledge and sharing knowledge, I'll ask you both the same question. Pat, there are business operators, again, younger, earlier in their journey than the two of you. What's one piece of advice you'd give an operator that if they followed this advice, they'd likely have a higher probability of success, both in happiness and profitability in their business?
Yeah, I'm going to go back to know what you know, but more importantly, know what you don't know and be honest about that. Being honest. I mean, that's where you're going to be straight up, be transparent, both with your team and your client. Don't hide anything. There's no reason to do that. And if you do, you're starting to get on that beaten path that you're going off that. And like I said, that typically bites somebody in the ass. So be honest with yourself, be honest with your team, be honest with your client.
Love it. Phil, same to you. Advice or wisdom you'd be game to pass on?
A couple of things. Compassion and honesty, I think, are the two things that I try to show in my career or interaction with people. And like Pat said, being honest and upfront with clients and understanding them as people, and being compassionate to employees and their needs, right? I mean, without our employees, right, and our team members, right, we could not do what we've done over the last 35 years. Not only, just here on Maui, but in the other islands as well. I mean, it only runs because of them. I'm just kind of overview and looking on top of it going, it's pretty amazing to watch. And the amount of integrity that these team members have, is second to none. And I think that gets brought out in the work that they do, in the pride that they have for the work. And, you have to you have to, give that praise to the employees. I mean, Pat and I, yeah, we're the CEO and those, we have those titles, but we cannot do all of this stuff without the employees.
Love it. Guys, are you okay if I share your email addresses with our viewers?
Sure.
All right. I'm going to put it on the screen. Pat, I've got Pat M. So now, Pat, you have to tell the story why it's Pat M, because Phil's is Phil.
Well, everybody else in the company is almost everybody. Ryan, we had 2 Ryans at one point, but that's fine. No, my email got hacked, I don't know, 15 plus years ago. And instead of trying to figure out how to deal with getting that cleaned up, I just switched it over to Pat M. So, and if
Pat
you ever get
M,
another Pat, they can use Pat.
That's right. At PAC Hawaii, PACHAWAII.com. And Phil, there you are, Phil at PACHawaii.com. And everyone should check out their beautiful website, PACHawaii.com.
Made by One Firefly.
Yes.
You're very gracious.
Shout out to One Firefly. Yes.
Yes. Oh, I thank you guys. Well, gentlemen, I want to wish you big congratulations from myself. There you go. You got the One Firefly stress ball there. He's putting it up in the camera. I want to say congratulations on 35 years. You guys are just, you're awesome people, awesome operators. You give back to your community. You give back to your team. You give back to this industry. You guys participate. Pat, no one can miss you at CEDIA wearing your loud pants and bring in smiles to everyone that you cross paths with. So both of you gentlemen, congratulations. And thanks for joining me on this episode of Automation Unplugged.
Of course. Thanks, Ron. You've been there for half of it. So
yeah.
Love it. Appreciate you guys. Take care.
Alrighty. Thanks.
Aloha.
Aloha.